Who joins us now. He's a data and information analyst. He's also an economic researcher. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
Well, interestingly, do the figures actually favor us as we celebrate, 53 years on? You know, you have economists who always tell us economy has improved, the inflation rate is this, but what is the reality? Looking at trace our history to today.
Thank you. It's happy independence to all Nigerians. The reality is we would have to look at all the sectors of the country to clearly be able to articulate if we've moved forward or if we are still where we were as a 1960, or perhaps we've moved behind. Going with the previous speaker, I would discuss the various sectors with respect to saying, is it good, bad, or ugly? Yeah. On the oil sector, for instance, between 1960 and 1970, there was no statistically significant records of the federal government using oil proceeds to fund the economy. However, in 1970 specifically, the federal government earned 166 million naira from oil. As at 1970, that was about 26% of all the income the federal government earned. So oil, as at 1970, accounted for 26% of all income that the federal government earned.
Which is just a little over a quarter.
Which is really just over a quarter as at 1970. As at 1974, oil was accounting for 82% of all income the federal government earned. So clearly in 4 years, oil had moved from 26% of income the federal government earned to 82% of income the federal government earned. 39 years after, we are still having the discussions on how to diversify the economy. So clearly, in terms of our plans and approach on diversifying the economy, we could easily rate that as being ugly. Clearly looking at the point from 1960 to 1970, where the federal government made more or less nothing from oil. 1970, we made about 26% from oil. By 1974, we were making about 82% from oil. As at today, in fact, as at 1999, we were still earning 76% from oil. That's the federal government. As at date, we still earn about 76% of all income from oil.
Have we judiciously used them?
Oh, clearly. Looking at the mass protest in terms of infrastructure decay and in terms of what people ask for, it's hard to say we've judiciously used the income from oil. But if we look at, it'll be hard for us to talk about the oil sector without talking about the non-oil sector. In 1960, agriculture accounted for 63% of the size of the economy. As at 1999, when we started the Fourth Republic, agriculture was down to 35%. So if we're going to be looking at the economy in terms of the non-oil sector, especially agriculture, looking at where we started from in 1960, of agriculture accounting for 63% of the size of the economy, and in 1999 when we started the Fourth Republic, agriculture accounting for 35% of the size of the economy, clearly that's ugly.
Now, some people will also tell you, some people will be interested more in the figures between 1999 till date. Why? Because of democracy. A host of people attribute a lot of our misfortunes to military rule and say that, you know, if only we had had sustained democracy for a while, truly practiced in its nature, that it ought to have brought the development that we seek. And maybe true federalism would have actually helped the development of the different regions, you know, to look more inwards rather than depend on a common purse. Would you agree with those people?
Well, I totally agree with those people. Because what you notice by looking at the numbers between 1960 and 1999, that there has been a significant decline in terms of what agri contributes to the economy. Like I said, 1960, agri was contributing 63%. 1999, agri was contributing 35%. Between 1999 to date, agriculture now contributes 39%. So what we will clearly say, it's gone up significantly much. 4% for agri is a significant amount. So though we could easily classify 1960 to 1999 as being an ugly period, it will still be hard to classify 1999 to date as a good period. We could say between 1999 today things have improved, but we are still far from where we need to be in terms of the non-oil sector.
What did you see in the figures in your research compared to looking at the early independence years and today? Because now we have more funds, more resources coming into the country, as opposed to when it was agriculture contributing 63%. But you have a lot more unemployment rate. Is that correct?
Oh, clearly. And unemployment rates as at date, what we have unemployment figures, for example, as at end of 2 years ago, for some reason, we still don't have numbers on unemployment figures for last year. Clearly, as of 1960, there are no facts to clearly state how many Nigerians were employed, how many Nigerians were unemployed. But with 70s data was still hard to get in 70s, especially regarding unemployment. What we could look at as a near proxy, a very, maybe not too near proxy, is how we've allocated our budgetary resources. So for instance, regarding the budget, an issue that is still being talked about today, which had always been talked about, was the issue of recurrent expenditure versus capital expenditure. In 1960, recurrent expenditure then was 59% of the total budget. So the same discussions we're having today, they were having 53 years ago, because recurrent expenditure then was 59% of the total budget. However, things started improving. As at 1980, which was, again, it could be regarded as our best year when it comes to recurrent expenditure, 1980 data shows recurrent expenditure then was only 32% in 1980. So we moved from a position of 59% of recurrence in 1960 to a fantastic position of 32% in 1980.
How did you do that?
Clearly, what had happened was we were exporting a bit more. We were exporting more. We were making more money from non-oil resources.
Non-oil, because some people describe the 70s as the boom year of oil, and, you know, that possibly peaked about the 80s.
Yeah, it was the boom year of oil, but we were also exporting then. Because if you look at the numbers, still on recurrent, in 1999, when we started the Fourth Republic, recurrent expenditure on the total budget then was 46%, as in 1999. Today, recurrent expenditure is about 68%.
So, you know, that period you talked about, perhaps some would say that accounted for some of the structures we've been able to see in the country at that time. Because if you look at it now that, well, we have an over-bloated recurrent expenditure in our budget, it doesn't really translate to any kind of developments, which almost all the governments, this inclusive, have always promised the people.
It doesn't, especially if we want to look at development on the very basic level. Basic level being not just looking at development on the infrastructure perspective, we're looking at development on education, being able to find out how the resources over the years have impacted on education. The most recent data we have, for example, on education shows that annually about 20.6 million Nigerians go into the primary schools. That is a good, that's good news as it is, but it's not so good news if we consider that about 10 million students that should be in schools are not in schools as of today. So clearly over the years we've made so much money, but it hasn't clearly impacted on the educational sector. You will be amazed to find out as at today, out of the 20.6 million students that attend primary schools in the country, only 1.6 of them attend private primary schools. So as at today, 93% of the population attend public schools.